He was the rebel painter who shocked the art world forever. Why did the Nazis fear his art so much? Here's why. These bright, colorful paintings hide a very dark secret. In July 1937, the Nazis held an exhibition ridiculing modern art. Several works were by Ludwig Kirchner. How could it have gotten to this point? Early life in Bavaria. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner was born on 6 May 1880 in the town of Aschaffenburg, in the Kingdom of Bavaria, then part of the German Empire. He was the first child of Ernst Kirchner Sr., a successful paper chemist, and Maria Kirchner, who came from a family with Huguenot ancestry. His father's profession gave the family a respectable middle-class status, but also required them to move often, since technical specialists in the paper industry were in demand across Germany and Switzerland. As a result, young Ernst's childhood was somewhat peripatetic, filled with changes of scenery and exposure to different local cultures and environments. These early relocations, though at times destabilizing, offered him an unusual breadth of visual impressions that would later find their way into his art. From a young age, Kirchner demonstrated a natural aptitude for drawing. He filled sketchbooks with images of houses, city streets, people, and landscapes. Particularly fascinating to him were railway stations, with their constant motion of trains and travelers, and the raw energy of urban life. His drawings were not merely copies of what he saw, but carried an expressive line, a tendency toward exaggeration and emotional emphasis that would become hallmarks of his later style. While his parents were indulgent of his interest in art, they were also pragmatic. They encouraged him to pursue a profession that could promise financial stability. The family's expectation was that he would apply his talents in a practical field such as architecture. Schooling and early influences. Kirchner attended schools in Frankfurt, Berlin, Switzerland, and Chemnitz, adapting to new environments with each move. He proved to be an intelligent, if sometimes restless, student. His artistic interests were balanced with a strong aptitude for technical subjects. In these formative years, he was exposed to a variety of cultural currents that were sweeping through Germany at the fin de siècle. Jugendstil, the German variant of Art Nouveau, with its emphasis on organic forms and decorative line. A resurgence of interest in German Gothic art, especially woodcuts and stained glass, and a fascination with non-Western artifacts, which were increasingly being exhibited in European museums as colonial expansion brought them to the continent. Kirchner also developed an enduring love of literature. He read Goethe, Nietzsche, and Dostoevsky, writers who emphasized the inner life, the conflict between instinct and social restraint, and the turbulence of modern existence. These readings deepened his sense that art should be more than representation. It should be an exploration of feeling, psychology, and the hidden forces of human life. University years in Dresden. In 1901, at the age of 21, Kirchner entered the Königlich Technische Hochschule in Dresden, today's Technical University of Dresden, to study architecture. At first, this choice satisfied both his family's desire for him to have a respectable profession and his own interest in drawing and design. Yet from the very beginning, Kirchner treated architecture less as a career and more as a foundation for a broader artistic practice. His professors introduced him to technical drawing, perspective, and construction. But he found himself increasingly restless within the confines of the curriculum. During these years, he met 3 fellow students who would change his life: Fritz Bleyl, Erich Heckel, and Carl Schmidt-Rottluff. All four young men shared a dissatisfaction with the conservative art world and a hunger for something more radical, immediate, and expressive. They spent hours sketching together, discussing art, and dreaming of forming their own movement. They were drawn to the idea of liberation from academic tradition, of creating art that would be true to their experiences and emotions, rather than bound by rules of realism or historicism. Kirchner also spent a year in Munich, 1903-1904, where he attended classes and visited galleries. Munich, at the time, was a vibrant center of avant-garde art, home to secessionist groups that challenged the academic establishment. Here, Kirchner encountered works by the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, as well as Edvard Munch, whose emotionally charged painting left a lasting impression on him. He also visited ethnographic museums, where he studied African and oceanic sculptures. These objects, often simplified in form, but powerful in impact. Artistic awakening. By the time he returned to Dresden in 1905, Kirchner had come to a decision. He would not live the life of a conventional architect. Instead, he would pursue art full-time. Architecture had given him technical discipline, but it was not enough. He wanted to push beyond the boundaries of conventional taste. He believed that art should be raw, direct, and unmediated, a record of what the artist felt in the moment. This conviction became the guiding principle of his career. That same year, together with Bleyl, Haeckel, and Schmidt-Rottluff, he founded Die Brücke, the Bridge, a group that aimed to create a new kind of art that would serve as a bridge between the past and the future. They saw themselves as rebels, forging a path to a modern art that would be authentic, intense, and emotionally resonant. They were inspired by older German traditions, especially woodcuts and late Gothic art, as well as by the expressive possibilities of color and form developed by the French avant-garde. They embraced nudity, outdoor painting, and communal creativity, often working side by side in studios filled with canvases, prints, and carved furniture. Kirchner emerged quickly as the leader of the group. He wrote their programmatic statements, organized exhibitions, and produced some of the group's most striking works. His art from this early period is characterized by angular forms, sharp outlines, and bold, non-naturalistic colors. Figures are often shown in motion, their bodies distorted to heighten emotional impact. The energy of his line conveys not only what he saw, but also what he felt: excitement, anxiety, sensuality, or alienation. The Manifesto of 1906. We are the bridge. We believe in change. In a new generation of artists, of dreamers, of people unafraid to feel, we call on everyone who wants to create honestly, who wants to live freely, who refuses to be told what art should be. We turn away from the old rules, from the systems that cage imagination. Our art is not polished. It's raw, it's emotional, it's real. We paint what we feel, not what we're told. We build a bridge between what was and what can be. We are Die Brücke. We are the bridge to the future. This statement captured both the inclusivity and the radicality of Die Brücke. It was less about style than about attitude, the rejection of tradition, the embrace of direct experience, the prioritization of inner necessity over external approval. The manifesto was distributed on woodcut prints, an apt medium for a group that revered the expressive power of simple lines and contrasts. For Kirchner personally, this period was one of extraordinary growth. He was still in his mid-20s, but he had already found a direction that would define the rest of his career. His early paintings, drawings, and woodcuts from Dresden combine youthful exuberance with technical daring. They already contain the themes that would preoccupy him throughout his life: the human body, the relationship between people and their environment, the clash between nature and modernity, and the exploration of psychological states. The move to Berlin. By 1911, Dresden felt too small for Kirchner's ambition. He moved to Berlin, a city that symbolized modernity and transformation. Berlin was a metropolis of electric lights, bustling streets, and social extremes. The city's restless energy became his new muse. Kirchner's Berlin street scenes, painted between 1912 and 1915, are among his most famous works. They depict elegant women, often prostitutes, walking the city's wide avenues, surrounded by men in dark suits. The colors are electric and unnatural: pinks, greens, purples, and blues. The figures are elongated, angular, and tense, their faces mask-like. These paintings are not portraits of individuals, but symbols of modern life: excitement mixed with alienation, glamour laced with anxiety. At the same time, Kirchner's personal life grew more complicated. He drank heavily, suffered from insomnia, and became increasingly anxious. His partner, Ernst Schilling, a former cabaret dancer, moved in with him and became both muse and caretaker. The intense creative period in Berlin also marked the beginning of tensions within Die Brücke. Kirchner's growing ego and self-promotion created friction. When he published a chronicle of the group in 1913 that centered largely on himself, his colleagues broke away. Die Brücke disbanded, but Kirchner's fame continued to rise. He began exhibiting at the Sturm Gallery, Berlin's most progressive art venue, and his reputation spread across Europe. War and psychological collapse. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 brought an abrupt change. Like many young men, Kirchner initially volunteered for the army, joining the 75th Field Artillery Regiment. But the military life, rigid, loud, and dehumanizing, clashed violently with his sensitive temperament. Within months, he suffered a severe nervous breakdown. He was discharged from service in 1915 and admitted to a sanatorium, where doctors diagnosed exhaustion and addiction to Veronal, a barbiturate prescribed for sleep. His hands trembled, and he could barely hold a brush. It was during this dark time that he created one of his most haunting masterpieces, Self-Portrait as a Soldier, 1915. In the painting, Kirchner stands in uniform, his face pale and eyes hollow, his right hand missing, symbolizing the fear that war had destroyed his artistic ability. Behind him stands a model, representing art and vitality now lost to him. The work is both deeply personal and universally symbolic, an image of trauma, impotence, and alienation. Throughout this period, his girlfriend Ernst Schilling remained by his side, nursing him through depression and addiction. Kirchner's recovery was slow, fragile, and incomplete. The war had scarred him permanently, both physically and mentally. Davos, retreat and renewal. In 1917, seeking refuge, Kirchner moved to Davos, Switzerland. Davos is a mountain resort famous for its clean air and sanatoriums. The alpine landscape offered him both peace and inspiration. "Here I am, closer to the sky," he wrote. "It is a new life." He began painting again, turning to the mountains and valleys around him for subjects. His alpine landscapes are filled with bright whites, sharp blues, and vivid greens. Yet they are not peaceful in the conventional sense. The mountains seem alive, angular and tense, like extensions of his own psyche. Kirchner built a small home in Wildboden, which he decorated with hand-carved furniture and murals. He lived simply, painting daily and carving wood sculptures. The move to Davos marked a new phase of his art. calmer in color, but still deeply expressive. His work began to attract attention again. In the 1920s, exhibitions in Bern, Zurich, and Berlin re-established his reputation. Critics praised his renewed vigor and the harmony between man and nature in his alpine paintings. But behind the success, his health remained fragile. He continued to struggle with depression and periodic relapses into addiction. Recognition and the shadow of politics. By the late 1920s, Kirchner was recognized as one of the most important living German artists. He was elected to the Prussian Academy of Arts in 1931, an honor he had long sought. Yet even in this moment of recognition, he remained uneasy. He felt isolated in Switzerland and haunted by fears that the world was changing in ways he could not control. Those fears proved prophetic. With the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in 1933, the German art world turned hostile to modernism. The Nazis condemned Expressionism as degenerate, labeling it un-German and decadent. Kirchner's paintings, with their distorted figures and psychological intensity, were prime targets. Entartete Kunst, Degenerate Art. Exhibition. In 1937, the Nazi regime organized the notorious Entartete Kunst, Degenerate Art exhibition in Munich. Although he lived safely in Switzerland, Kirchner's works were still held in German museums. In 1937, the Nazis confiscated more than 600 of his works, more than from any other artist, and included several in the infamous Degenerate Art exhibition in Munich. The show was meant to mock modern artists, displaying their work with insulting captions and chaotic arrangements. For Kirchner, this was devastating. He had devoted his life to art, and now his homeland denounced it as corruption. He was expelled from the academy, his reputation destroyed in Germany. He wrote despairingly that he felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. By the late 1930s, Kirchner's health had deteriorated again. The tense situation in Europe, the loss of his reputation in Germany, and the fear of impending war weighed heavily on him. He became increasingly paranoid and withdrawn, convinced that the Nazis might invade Switzerland and destroy his remaining works. Still, he continued to paint, producing stark symbolic works with simplified forms and subdued colors. These late paintings have an austere beauty, as if distilled from exhaustion and resignation. On June 15, 1938, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner died outside his home in Frauenkirch, near Davos, reportedly by suicide. He was 58 years old. His partner, Erna Schilling, buried him in the Davos cemetery, where she would join him 7 years later. After World War II, as Germany sought to rebuild its cultural identity, his work was rediscovered and celebrated as a symbol of artistic freedom and resistance. Museums restored his paintings, and scholars recognized him as one of the founders of modern German art. Today, his works hang in major museums around the world, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the National Gallery in Berlin, and the Kirchner Museum Davos, which houses a vast collection of his paintings, prints, and drawings. His art remains as vivid and unsettling as when it was first painted, full of movement, tension, and feeling. Through his jagged lines and blazing colors, Kirchner expressed not only his personal anguish, but the turbulence of an entire century. He once wrote, "Art is the cry of the soul that has seen too much." Few artists embodied that truth as completely as Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, a man who saw beauty and madness intertwined, and who turned both into art that still speaks with raw human power. Thank you for watching this video.